Hi, everyone. This is Lead with Who You Are, and I'm Dia Bondi. And on this show, we explore and discover what it truly means to lead with who you are, and we're doing it with people who embody just that. And today, this episode is one that is kind of special to me. It's a re-release of our conversation with Shasta Nelson, friendship expert and author of The Business of Friendship, among other books. We are re-releasing this episode because we're in early 2023 and loneliness is still an epidemic in this country. We're coming out of the holidays, which for a lot of folks can be kind of a lonely time. And compounded on that is the fact that the market shifts have caused a lot of layoffs in and outside of tech. And many of you or people in your life or workplace are losing their friendships at work with the loss of their jobs. We thought this would be a useful episode for those of you who are looking to build friendships, to be a salve for those losses you may have had, and with the loneliness you may be experiencing right now. Shasta shares in this episode why friendships are so important and why friendships at work can't be ignored, and she'll share her 3-part framework for building friendships as adult. Friendships with who you are. I swear her framework is so useful, so simple, and easy for you to get started on tomorrow. I promise you can do it. So listen in. Hey, just a quick reminder. You can subscribe to this show on your podcast platform of choice. We're live nearly everywhere, and you can always listen to the show at diabondi.com. If there's a leader or innovator in your life who is at their shiniest when they lead with who they truly are, please share the show with them and rate, subscribe, and leave us a review. It makes a huge difference in the reach that the show has when you let everyone else know what you love about the show. Thanks so much. Shasta Nelson, she is a leading expert on friendship who speaks all over the country, and she facilitates events for all about connection. And she's been quoted in magazines and newspapers, online and print, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and Reader's Digest, and has been interviewed live on over dozens of TV shows. Check this out, including The Today Show and The Steve Harvey Show. Kind of feeling intimidated. But if you haven't yet seen her popular TEDx talk, you'll want to check that out. I watched it actually a couple of weeks ago, and she does not pull punches, let me just say. Enthusiastic and right for the jugular. Her previous books, she wrote 3 books, which is why I invited her onto the show. I mean, all her work is why I invited her. But her 3 books that she has out right now are Friendships Don't Just Happen, which is a guide for making new friends as an adult, which seems like such an incredible asset. Frientimacy, How to Deepen Friendships for Lifelong Health and Happiness, which teaches us how to make our relationships more meaningful. Who doesn't want that? And in her newest book, she takes all of her expertise about friendships and puts it and applies it to the workplace. Her latest book is called The Business of Friendship, Making the Most of Our Relationships Where We Spend Most of Our Time. So I'm so glad to have Shasta Nelson with us today. Hello, Shasta Nelson.
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you on the Dia Bondi Show as our very, very first guest for actually episode 5.
I'm honored.
It's so funny. So I first met you, yes, at the Clock Factory, where Arthur and I used to share an office space together, along with a few other creatives and production types. I was hosting Maria Ross's book launch for The Empathy Edge, which I listened to The Business of Friendship over the weekend, and I heard you cite her book in there. Yay.
Yes.
Also, side note for your book, holy research. Wow.
There was a lot
on that. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I remember we didn't get a chance to visit very much, but I was so compelled by you for whatever reason. You were there with your husband, I think. Mm-hmm. And I was like, ooh, that's a Shasta Nelson. I want to get to know her.
Likewise.
And I remember we talked about potlucking.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah. And then the whole world shut down.
I know. And we were like, let's be in a potluck together, because I never really loved potlucking until I became a full-on adult, and actually as a parent. Potlucking to me is the most low stakes, beautiful, generous way to cultivate friendships. My favorite thing about a potluck, well, so during that time when we were non-COVID, let me just talk about some weird friendship stuff for just a second. Maybe you'd be like, no, it's not weird. It's amazing. But I think it's weird. We always had these Sunday night potlucks at my house. We live in in a neighborhood that's fairly dense, and all of us who are, parent friends, there's a group of maybe 5 sort of core families hang out together. We have these end of the week potlucks. Arthur, I think I extended an invitation to you a few times where I'm like, hey, we're doing a courtyard 6 o'clock. And like the core group is like, no problem. I got a salad, leftover spinach salad, and I got this soup. I'm going to bring whatever. And we like do a thing. And then when new families who we were like, oh, let's totally invite them, would get folded in, like, I'm mostly friends with the moms in these groups. Like, it was always so fun and delightful to have these moms show up with their whatever thing they thought was a paltry offering and to feel like it wasn't good enough or they were going to be teased about, or like it was, it was like a vulnerable moment to bring and share food. And that like me, my friend Maya, and actually some of the other women I'll talk about today would just be like, no, like if you have to bring cheese and crackers, girl, we got you. Like that's yes.
So cool.
And I feel like it was such like an initiation for folks to come in and feel like they could bring whatever they had and have it not be a problem,
I love that. You just described like the friendship dream that so many people have. Like the idea of getting folded into a group, that's so amazing, or even having this consistent community where you know that these people will notice if you're missing or gone. And then I love the part about the potluck element. Like for me, friendship is always with food. Like those two things just go together so well. But the thing about the potluck I think is so great is it takes us out of, like, to your point, it takes us out of the entertaining mode and puts us more in the connecting and sharing and breaking bread together mode. But we still come with that, like, wanting to impress each other.
Yeah, it has like built-in vulnerability.
It is.
You got to take the risk of bringing something to share, even if you're a bad cook or you were really tired and you just had to go into your cupboard and bring a box of crackers.
Totally. And yet that's what we all kind of dream of, is the friend that can just like come over with the messy house that we don't have to wow and we don't have to like put on a whole entertaining meal. We can just order pizza, like that's the dream. And yet we're kind of scared to like go straight there. So that's a great story.
So yeah, we never got to have our potluck, Shasta, but I feel like this is the first one we're having right now.
Awesome.
We're bringing our ideas together to the table. How about that?
There we go.
Dia, I promise I will come to one of your potlucks one of these days when you give me more than 3 hours notice.
I know it does happen that way a lot. I just like send a text thread. I'm like, how about what do you have? Come up the hill in 3 hours. Yeah, it's true. So I wanted to bring you on the show because you're a friendship expert, which is just in and of itself completely badass. And then the other thing was that I have in the last 2 years launched this project that started with this project called Ask Like an Auctioneer, aimed at helping 1 million women ask for more and get it, using everything I learned from my wild and goofy midlife impact hobby I took on of auctioneering for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits that benefit women and girls. And that slowly sort of morphed into a mission to help put more money and decision-making power in the hands of women so we can change everything for all of us. And as part of that, we're launching, this is episode 5 of the Dia Bondi Show, a big podcast for women with goals. So something that, has sort of stayed in my heart since I launched this new sort of mission and project is that I was involved with the Women's Network a couple of years ago, and we went to, it was a digital virtual network that had sometimes sort of city-specific face-to-face meetups. And so I went to one in San Francisco one night, and we all, I don't know how many women there were there, maybe 15 or 20. There was a big, huge circle in some flat in San Francisco, and everyone went around and introduced themselves and said, like, why they were there. And for one, I was the oldest woman in the circle, number one. Number two, it was remarkable how many women, and the profile of this community are like ambitious, super smart, really competent women who are living it in a lot of ways on their own terms. They've moved from everywhere to pursue their dreams. They're working at gene therapy companies and investment companies and VC. They're managing their own portfolios. They're like these women are like on it, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was incredible to me going around the room. So many women in the room said, I'm here tonight. I do this. I work at this fancy company. I have this fancy job. And I'm here because I don't have any friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my heart just like,
yeah.
I was like, it makes me choked up even thinking about it right now. I was like, but you are all the women who are that sort of picture of ambition and sort of getting what you want in life. And it was, nobody used the L word.
Yeah.
Nobody used lonely, which I know is a word you use a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that just stuck with me, and I kind of put it in my back pocket. And then when I met you, I was like, I want to have this conversation one day, and this is exactly the time to do it. And where do friendships fit in to our, fit into our lives as we pursue our goals? So that's sort of like the seat of the conversation I want to have today.
Yeah, I love that story. It just puts a face and a feeling to exactly what is so, so, so common. And it reminds me, it's I used to be a life coach back in the day, and it was life coaching those people you just described, where they were hiring me for all kinds of other big, amazing goals. And to each person, I would ask, what are your friends saying? How are your friends supporting you? Because I knew I wasn't a friendship expert back then. That wasn't my thing. But I knew from the research that if they want to go start a company, but all their friends think that's irresponsible, there's going to be some kind of disconnect. But if all their friends start their own companies, that's a whole different thing. And so I was always asking, like, what are your friends saying about this? Or, to a person, they were just like, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I just went through a divorce and all my friendships are kind of up in the air. Or like, well, I just moved here a couple years ago and I've lost touch with those friends, but I haven't made new friends. Or I don't really talk about this kind of thing with my friends. And I mean, it was almost to a woman, and I walked away with a similar feeling, like, wow, like just wow, that we are some of the most successful, brilliant, amazing go-getters are feeling that loneliness. And that was really my deep dive into, like, how can I help these women, and starting looking for resources. That really is what kind of put me down this road of, like, where are the resources? And like, wow, this is really dismal. And there's so much compelling research, and yet nobody's translating that. And everybody's obsessed with romantic relationships and parent-child relationships, when the vast majority of the relationships in our lives are not those few. It's like all the other ones that really, especially for women, but men too, correlate so much to our health and happiness. And so really that was the deep dive for me, the kind of the impetus. So yeah, similar story where you look around, and I'm often on stage now speaking to, we often use the word lonely to think of this recluse, this hermit, this person with no social skills. We haven't seen them in a couple of years. Their shutters are closed. And I'm like, the truth of the matter is the loneliest people today are the successful. They're the ones who are so busy with so many relationships. Could be very popular, very scheduled. They're taking care of kids and family, and they're good daughters and mothers and fathers, and they're often in careers where they're taking care of people and are charming and amazing and have great people skills and are liked. And yet at the end of the day, they feel like, does anybody really know me? Am I really confiding in anyone? Am I seen for who I am? Am I loved for who I am? And that feeling right there is that hunger for being really close to people.
Yeah, so in that, I feel like there is a seat when we look at our lives. There's like, if our lives are a big dining table, you look at, like, okay, there's my romantic partner, he or she, they sit in that chair. There's the people that I care for, kiddos, maybe they sit in that chair. My bosses and the people that I report to, the people that are the power holders in my life, they sit in that chair. And then my network, quote unquote, sits in that chair. And then, like, there's all these chairs that belong to different things. Like, what are friendships for?
Yeah. Well, and our friends can be in some of those categories and in some of those chairs for sure. And so, like right now, as you were saying, the book I just wrote, The Business of Friendship, as adults, work is the number one place where we're making our friends. And so that network could hold some of our best friends, certainly our boss and our colleagues. And so our friends can be there. I use the word friend broadly in those kinds of ways to recognize that any relationship, my definition of friendship is any relationship where both people feel seen in a safe and satisfying way.
And I wrote that down and put it on my sticky note right next to me. Yeah.
And so it can be broad. And I would say, like, here we are, Arthur and Dia and myself are connecting. And in this moment, we would have the loosest level of that. We're not confiding. We're not keep promising ourselves to be friends forever. But in this moment, we each want to be seen in a way that feels safe. And then we get off and feel satisfied. And that would be the hope I have for any meeting, for any connection. But obviously that would increase in intimacy or in depth or in deepness, the more we practice those things. And so I use the word Frientimacy to kind of be the coined word for like the deepest level of intimacy. And I think that's when I'm doing my research, that's what most of us are missing. Most of us actually know enough people. Most of us know how to be kind to people and be friendly with people. Most of us, when we're lonely, it's because we're missing the frientimacy, the highest levels of that, where I truly feel seen in so many areas of my life, where I'm not just a mom in this group and a kick-ass woman in this group and a father in this group and somebody in this church, but it's like those relationships where I'm known, I'm seen, it feels good, they're there for me, and I can trust those bonds. And so I think for all of us, though, it's having a mix. One of the biggest studies that jumped out at me when I was researching this book was the Dr. Niven from Ohio State University, I believe. He said people often think of happiness as this really ambiguous thing, like just jello, it's hard to nail against a wall. And he said it's not ambiguous at all. He took all the research studies around the world, longitudinal studies of all these different friendships, and he said 70% of our happiness comes down to our relationships. And when you look at all the things that make us happy, and that made up, he put it into 4 categories of the quantity of our relationships, the quality of our relationships, our family relationships, and then our colleagues and neighbors and kind of that group. And so some of us do really well in 1 or 2 of those, but the happiest people, the ones who feel most connected, have that kind of breadth of a network and depth with a few people, and they all matter to our happiness.
I suspect that those women in that circle that I mentioned in my earlier story, or have a really wide net. Maybe the breadth is there, but maybe the depth is not. And there's 2 things that are coming up for me as I think about this. One is like, I have had moments in my 3 things actually. One is that I don't have the only friend that somebody who I could have that seen in a safe and satisfying way, that is continued from my earlier life is my husband. I don't have any friends left over from high school, college, because I think, you speak about how frequency or you don't use the word frequency, but the consistency.
Frequency is one of those.
Done with college, the consistency of being in study group together is gone, or, being housemates is gone. And so as soon as that consistency is gone, there's no other forcing function to keep that consistency going, or for whatever reason. And I moved to the Bay Area after I had kiddos, and I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, I was like, oh, where should I put the kids in preschool? What do I need to look for in preschool? What does that mean? Does academics matter? Like, does proximity matter? Like, what's the thing that matters? And she was like, girl, your kids don't care. Your kids do not care where they go to preschool. She was like, why you need to go to preschool is that you need friends. And she said, that's why you have to go to a co-op. And we went to we registered for a co-op, and I have friends now that are 10, 12 years old that are that are totally in my heart. So I made friends. My brother has friends left over from his kidhood that are rich and deep, and they are deeply connected. I didn't have that. I had to make them sort of in my late 30s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Makes me think that I have had moments in my 30s as well where other women, I'm in my 40s now, other women have sat with me and have said, like, I can see them sweating and awkwardly saying they want to be friends with me and to not know how to get started.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, for women who know they need and want more depth, what's the first step they take?
Yeah. And let me just normalize what you just named. It's really incredibly common. And we have a lot of shame in our culture around, like, if we have to admit we need friends, that there's something wrong with us. And it's so heartbreaking. The research actually shows that we replace half of our close friends every 7 years. So you think about who you're close to now, and chances are high that a few of those names are not people you were confiding in 7 years ago. You may not have even known them 7 years ago. And so certainly there are the stories. Hopefully half of our network are close friends. Like you said, you maintain, you kind of made it past that 7 year, and they can become more going through different life stage friends with you. But for many of us, there is a revolving door there, and that goes all the way through. I do a lot of interviews, like with ARP and with retirees. There's a whole nother level of friends dropping off when we quit our careers. And so it's normal, I guess, is what I just want to say, that all through our life, we have to become adept at making new friends. It's not something to be ashamed of at all. It's those of us who quickly identify that. And really the first thing that I'm always kind of big on is kind of just prioritizing a little bit. I mean, it depends. I think my first book was Friendships Don't Just Happen. And one of the things I love about that book is I have an assessment in there and I teach the 5 different types of friends. And what I love about that is that for some people, they're surprised that they're lonely because they're like, I have a lot of friends. Like, why am I feeling this? And so it's helpful to identify, well, I have these 3 or 4 different types of friends, but I'm missing this type of friend. And so for some of us, it's lonely for a certain experience, a certain type of friend, which can be really helpful to identify. Some of us are lonely because we just moved to a new area and we truly don't know people and we don't feel like we belong, or our kids started a new school, or we started attending a new religious, or anywhere we want to be regular is going to feel lonely until we feel like we have some relationships there. So for some of us, it's like, I don't feel rooted in this place, this context, this job yet. And so that's our loneliness. It doesn't mean we don't have best friends. It might mean we need to make relationships in this space. And for some of us, it's truly what I was speaking to earlier, I really believe that the majority of us, and the research is backing this up, that it's not for lack of interaction, but it's for lack of intimacy. And so for most of us, I would venture to guess the best place to start is naming of the people you do know. You already just assume you know enough people. I think many of us jump to the conclusion that if I'm lonely, I need to go meet more people. And that might be true for a few of us in those first examples I gave. But for the vast majority of us, we know enough people. It's that we don't know how to actually turn the people we've met into friends. And so
that's exactly, like, literally one night after a gathering that I hosted, one woman stayed just awkwardly procrastinating for a really long time until I was like, girl, I'm turning off the lights. And her husband called and she goes, hey babe, she's like in the phone. She's like, hey babe, yeah. No, I'm having the conversation right now. Okay, see you in an hour. In that moment, she basically friend proposed to me. Or friend, like, will you go out on a first date with me? And there was incredible vulnerability in that. What I'm hearing you say is, like, we can actually take inventory of the friends that come from lots of different places in our lives and make a decision about who we want to deepen with. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think that's the first place to start, is kind of prioritizing. I'm like, pull out a Post-it note. Don't make this overly complicated. And just like write down the names of a few people that you wish you were closer to, that you lean in when they're around, that you enjoy being with. Like, don't overcomplicate it, but just kind of start writing down 5, 6 names. And then just the goal is to start kind of prioritizing. And we can get into like, what are the 3 requirements of every relationship? I typically wouldn't be encouraging the friend proposal concept. I love her bravery. And I think most of us err on the other side and could, like, practice doing a little more brave stuff, but it doesn't have to be trying to jump somebody.
Proposal, yeah.
Just jump somebody from from 1 to 5 right away. It's like let's just like figure out how to just slowly keep adding in the ingredients that we know bond people, and trust that as we do that with a handful of people, we will find a few people that are responsive and that we can deepen that with.
Yeah, and to be fair, by the way, she and I are still really good friends. I give her
Awesome.
all my leftover baby clothes to our baby. Like, lots has happened since then, and really, her friendship proposal for me wasn't like, can we be friends? It was more like, I want to get to know you to get better. Like, can we find time in the next month to like have lunch? Or, she was basically like, I've identified you as somebody that I'm really interested in learning more about. Can we find a way to do? Can you fit me into your life a little bit so we can get to know one another? It definitely wasn't a deep end moment, but I did recognize that there was a little bit of like, making the offer to take me to lunch was in and of itself a risk, because she was opening herself to me just a little bit.
We have a whole culture around dating where there's protocol, and the rules are changing all the time, so to speak. But we understand that to get to know each other, one of us has to invite the other person to go do something. We have to hang out. Then we know that if it went well, we need to do it again sometime. And it's like we have this these terms, and we'll eventually have a conversation that says like, are we exclusive, or are you still dating? And like, who are we as a relationship? What are we? Like, we have these like steps, but with friendship, it's one of the most complicated factors is that we don't know who should be inviting who, and is it awkward to invite, and I can't just walk up and say, you look great, can I have your phone number and call you, and you look fun, and there is a lot less acceptance and cultural familiarity around that, so it's going to feel more awkward.
So in your book, The Business of Friendship, making the most of our relationships where we spend most of our time, I have been in and around, I have only had a job for 3 years of my entire adult life. I've been an independent professional like my whole life, and but I am in and around the world of like managing people and feedback and, goal setting, performance reviews and all that stuff. And we talk a lot about our performance. We do a lot of this feedback stuff, but I never hear folks talking about managers or coworkers talking about their relationships explicitly, not necessarily tied to like performance feedback, but just like how strong is our relationship? How we doing on this relationship? Like explicitly talking about that, what you talk about the third entity, in your book, or you reference the third entity there, like how much more can we talk about our relationships with one another?
So much more. One of the assessments I go into companies and do is I have a healthy team relationship assessment, and each person on the team has to answer basically 10 questions in each of the 3 requirements of relationship, and they end up getting a score. So that's their experience of their relationship or their belonging on the team. And then we take all those individual scores and compile them to come up with team averages. And it's one of the most fun conversations to start really talking about is saying positivity, that's your lowest score as a team. So how are we expecting to bond? Like, why would people want to keep showing up more often if they feel worse when they hang out with you? Or like, this is why they're not looking forward to those virtual meetings every single day. Like they get off more tired, more drained, and so we can start looking at and kind of assessing it. It gives us this tangible language to actually kind of name and say, we know now what bonds people together. And so we can actually look at and evaluate and do a better job of saying, this isn't a personal attack. This isn't like something that any one person, I think that's one of the most powerful things about it actually, is that it's often not because they're bad or they're toxic or all this kind of stuff. It's simply that most of us have never been taught how to build meaningful relationships. When you look at the big job studies now, social skills are the number one requirement. Like we so often think we're in this technical age, but the truth of the matter is most of our jobs, like once we learn the technology of that job, it's the same thing every single day. Like we're not having to do that much more computer innovation stuff every day. It kind of becomes routine. Whereas it's those interpersonal relationships that could just continue to be such a rub. And so most of us have not been trained in our social skills. We don't actually know what to do. We avoid conflict. We're afraid of rejection. I mean, so this is an area that gets really messy. And I think one of the most powerful things we can do, I love, not that it needs to be a performance review, but having language for talking about this as a team or even just as a friendship, to just being able to, it's okay to come and say, I have needs, or when you do this, I feel this way, or like, how could we make this better? Or like, what makes you feel most loved, and so be able to actually talk about our relationship is so powerful.
So I do this weekly thing with a small group of women. We call it the bitch and wine. And it's an hour right now because we're in COVID. It's a Zoom call. Otherwise it's sitting on somebody's back deck, and we bitch and wine. And what we don't do is try to solve each other's problems. We just let each other bitch and wine.
Love it.
And sometimes it's WHINE and sometimes it's WINE or whatever. We could call it bitch and tea if people are bringing tea that day. But
Arthur, have you been invited to this one? This one sounds very fun.
No, I'm still waiting for my invite on that one.
Well, I can't promise that it's going to happen within 3 hours, any further out than 3 hours. No, I'm just kidding. It's an ongoing date.
If all I have to do is bring my complaints, then that's much easier than having to prepare food.
It's pretty easy potluck. It is a potluck of complaints. That's exactly what it is. Oh,
Listen,
my God.
I can bitch about stuff right now if you want.
Let's turn this around.
I was thinking about, so the question inside of this is like, how do friendships help us reach our goals even when our friends don't give a shit about our goals? So like this group of women that I told them I was going to sort of gently throw them under the bus this way, but it's not really throwing them under the bus, that like these girls, they love me. They tell me they love me, but literally, I don't think any one of us could say very accurately what each other do professionally. One's a lawyer, one's an eye doctor, one is a pet. She does stuff with animals. I do what I do, whatever the hell this is. One of them's a public health, like that. But we couldn't get so. What I mean is, sometimes I'll say, guys, I'm doing this thing. I have this goal. Then, they know last year, maybe they didn't know, but I can say I have this goal and they're like, yay for you. Or if I like make a big achievement toward it, they're like, but when are we going camping next? There's like, but for some reason it doesn't hurt my heart. It doesn't make me feel ignored. It makes me feel like whether I'm reaching my goals or not. And I actually brought this up with him last night. I was like, what is it about our friendship that is okay when I'm trying to do stuff and you girls are hardly even watching. And I think, and my friend Maya said, she said, it's because we're here for who you are, not what you do. So in the business of friendships, in the front end of the book, you talked a lot about how, friendships can lower our stress levels, which maybe helps us perform better. I don't know. So what are your thoughts about how do our friendships help us reach our goals even when they don't give a shit about our goals?
I love how you articulated that. And it's one of the things when I like kind of circling back to that first book, friendships don't just happen. I teach 5 different types of friends, and you're describing kind of the fifth deepest level where it's like we have consistency, we have vulnerability, we leave feeling good. Those are the 3 requirements of relationship: positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And so you have that with them. And so often we can sometimes, whether it's to your story with its career, it often happens too, where women will say, all my friends are married and I'm the only single one. Or one of the stories I share in that book is one of my friends was the first one to have a baby in that group. And she was just like, you guys don't know this side of me, right? And so we could empathize and we could kind of love her, and like what your friends do with you, like, yay, but we don't know what it's like to have a baby and be up all night long. And so I said, go make a group, make some friends with moms, like join a mom's group. And I felt like she was kind of betraying us to do that. And I was like, no, that's a part of you that needs to be expressed and seen and supported. And then it was so interesting because down the road, a few months later, I was like, how's that mom's group going? And she was like, they don't even know me outside of being, Lily's mom. And so they don't even know what I do. And I was like, that's okay. That's what we're here for, And so it was an interesting thing for us to realize, like, that second group of friends is the common friends. Like, these are people that I'm here because we're committed to losing weight, because we're surviving cancer together, because we're entrepreneurs, because we're authors, because we're in the law firm, And so we have this commonality, and it's so powerful because we do want to be seen in that area. We do need to surround ourselves with people who can support that, give ideas to that, who actually know what's going on in that zone. That's what makes work friends so powerful, is my friends who are authors, they know what it means that I published a book, whereas my other friends are like, yay, you published a book, but they have no clue, what goes on and what that really means. And just like I don't know what it's like to wake up all night long with a crying baby, we can empathize, we can cheer. And I think there's something so beautiful about having those friends who kind of know that experience, but commonality, while giving you a lot in a certain context, is not what actually bonds us. And so we can have a whole bunch in commonality, and you would be missing what you have with those friends, your bitch and wine group. What you have with those friends is friendship, where you've got the positivity, the consistency, and the vulnerability. Commonalities are only important in a relationship if they help us do those 3 things. And so you could line me up with like my twin, and it doesn't mean we're going to be any better friends unless we practice those 3 things. And so I'm kind of one of those people who says it's not either or. It's like, make sure you have those friends who know your heart, who you can be real with, what you have there. And if there's a side of you that like is wanting to be a painter right now, or wanting to go write a book, or wanting to run a marathon, like, rather than be mad at our friends for not having the same goal or the same career or the same life stage, go find people who can support that side of you. And then don't be mad at those friends for not knowing your heart too. Like, they serve different purposes, and it's okay. They both are meaningful in different ways, and on both sides help you live your goals. Like, it's powerful that your friend was able to say, we love you for who you are. We don't care if you fail all your goals. Whereas in a group of people who are just like you might feel a lot more judgment there. You may not feel safe being vulnerable if you're not making those goals, and so there's different dynamics. And I think those of us who live with the most sense of connection and love and acceptance in our lives are those who know that different friends meet different needs in us, see us in different ways that feel safe and satisfying, and they'll see different sides of us. And I think that's important. I think it's good. And I think it leaves you feeling more supported in more areas of your life.
You wrote and released The Business of Friendships last year in 2020. Why does this book matter now?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's nothing worse than like realizing everyone's working remote when you're actually telling the world it's really important that these friendships matter at work. It's interesting to watch. And I will say, though, our work relationships still matter, whether they're virtual or in person. And that is because we are spending the bulk of our day making whatever contribution it is we're each making. This is the bulk of our day. This is the bulk of our hours and what we're spending our lives doing. And it is, if we feel lonely in that, if we don't feel witnessed, if we don't feel seen, if we don't feel supported in that, it is virtually impossible to make up our social needs outside of that. We know that we don't have this like bucket of personal life that we can spend enough time building friendships in. So that used to be what I was spending so much time doing. My first few books were, here's how to make friends. And it was almost always in your personal life because we've often treated, friendship in that section. And I was like, I could talk you into one more phone call a week. I could talk you into one more girls' weekend a year, and it's not going to turn this ship around. Like if you're lonely the bulk of your day, then we can't make this up. And so it's really important that we it's kind of like sending your kids to school and hoping that they don't build any friendships at school, and then thinking that you can make it up in the afternoon play program or something. I mean, we just need all the whole time. So it's really important now for us to be having these conversations. How do we do this if we stay remote? How do we do this safely if we're in person? We know that people who feel like they have a best friend at work are 7 times more engaged. So if I'm an HR person, if I'm a manager, this is a really big deal to me. If I care about mental health, if I care about resiliency, if I care about your engagement and retention, then I should be asking, how am I, not just how many meetings are we having and are we meeting our product numbers? It should be coming down to what am I doing to help make sure my team feels connected to each other, likes each other, feels like they're supported by each other. And that really becomes, if we can take care of that piece, then it actually, so much of the other things that we stress about will actually play out better. We have better customer service. We have more creativity. They feel safer brainstorming. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If we can focus on making people feel like they belong at work, it's so important.
And where can folks find you and do more with you, Shasta?
Well, the businessoffriendship.com has where you can get the book and then a whole bunch of free stuff that you can do that. And then shastanelson.com if you are looking for me to come in and work with a team or a corporation or speak, happy to do that and sign up for my list there. You never know what I'm going to do. I don't even know what I'm going to do year to year. Like I do international trips and retreats and, it just changes all the time. So if you want to be a part of any of that, you'll have to sign up for my list. And when I know what I'm doing, you'll know what I'm doing.
And you have something called a Frientimacy quiz that folks can take as well. Is that true?
Yes. If you go to shastanelson.com, right along the top is that quiz. And that's a great quiz for helping you kind of assess yourself as a friend in positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. We can measure the health of any relationship by those 3 things. I can guarantee anybody listening that you have never built a meaningful relationship without those 3 things. And conversely, any relationship that's not feeling meaningful right now, it's because at least one of those 3 things is lacking. And so that quiz will help you kind of take an assessment of if you were to focus on one of those 3 things that would make the biggest difference to you feeling more connected to your friendships, which one would it be?
Well, fantastic. I loved having you, Shasta. You're amazing. And this is not the last potluck of ideas we're going to have. Lead with Who You Are is a production of Dia Bondi Communications. Scored, mixed, and produced by Arthur Leon Adams III. And executive produced by Mandy Miranda. You can reach out to us at hello@diabondi.com or leave us a voicemail at 341-333-2997. You can rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Go to diabondi.com for show notes and to learn about all it is that we do to help you speak powerfully and lead with who you are.